a lone seaplane pilot cutting through a winter storm off the coast of Maine, searching for silence, not salvation. But when his German shepherd began to growl and press against the glass, he looked down and froze. 3 letters, carved into the snow by desperate hands. SOS. There shouldn't have been life on that island. No houses, no boats, no hope. Yet as he descended through the blizzard, something was waiting beneath the white. Something that would drag him into a nightmare of human trafficking, hidden sins, and one woman's final prayer for rescue. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you believe that miracles still exist, even in the coldest storms, tap subscribe. The wind howled across the frozen Atlantic, pushing sheets of white against the Maine coastline until sea and sky became one gray blur. Inside a weathered 1976 Cessna seaplane, Jack Coleman, 45, gripped the yoke with hands calloused from years of flying and solitude. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair streaked by frost, a coarse jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Once a Navy pilot, disciplined and precise, he now carried a quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes from too many missions that ended too late, too many faces lost in memory. Flying was no longer freedom for him. It was penance. At his side lay Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with silver-gray fur and amber eyes that held the calm focus of a soldier. His left ear bore a faint scar, a relic from his K-9 unit days. Rex had been trained to detect explosives and emotion alike. He could sense unease long before Jack could admit it. Between them existed a wordless rhythm, Jack's silence matched by the dog's loyalty. For hours, the engine's drone was Jack's shield. Then Rex stirred, muscles tightening, his head lifting toward the window. A low whine broke from his throat. Jack frowned. "What is it, buddy?" he muttered. Rex's paw scratched lightly against the glass, eyes locked downward. Following the dog's gaze, Jack banked the plane, and the gray expanse of sea tilted until the shoreline came into view. There, etched into the snow like a desperate prayer, 3 massive letters screamed up from the beach. SOS. The message looked too deliberate to be random driftwood. Jack's pulse kicked. He'd flown this route dozens of times. No one lived on that island. He circled once more, the whitecaps below swirling like ghosts. For a long moment, he considered flying on, ignoring it, preserving his fragile silence. But Rex barked, a sharp, urgent sound that cut through the engine's roar. With a sigh that came from somewhere deep and tired, Jack lowered the flaps and brought the plane down. The floats hissed against the icy surf, a perfect landing swallowed by wind. When the propeller stilled, the silence struck him harder than the cold ever could. He sat for a second, hand on the throttle, debating. His reflection in the glass looked older than 45, lines carved by regret, not time. "All right, partner," he murmured. "Let's see what's calling us." Jack pulled on his worn leather jacket and unlatched the door. The world outside bit into his skin. Rex leapt first, paws splashing into the freezing shallows, nose already working. Jack followed, boots crunching into a mix of sand and ice. The wind carried the metallic tang of salt, and something else, faint but undeniable: blood. Rex stiffened, growling low as he moved toward the origin of the scent. On the beach lay a rusted length of chain, half buried beneath snow, its end twisted like it had been torn loose. Beside it were small footprints, too delicate for a man, leading inland toward the forest of dark pines. Jack crouched, gloved fingers brushing the prints. They were fresh. Hours, not days. His stomach clenched. Whoever made them was barefoot or wearing light shoes. In this weather, that meant they were either dead or close to it. He looked at Rex. Track. The dog moved immediately, tail low, nose sweeping the frozen ground. Jack followed, flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the thickening snow. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. The only sounds their breathing and the crunch of ice underfoot. Jack's thoughts drifted to Afghanistan, to a mountain ridge where he'd once waited for a rescue that never came. The silence back then had sounded like this, endless, watchful, ready to swallow hope. His jaw tightened. He wouldn't let history repeat. Rex stopped. Every hair on the dog's back stood up. Jack froze beside him, the flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. From somewhere ahead came a muffled sound, a faint, broken moan, then a choked scream quickly smothered. Jack's heart pounded. He raised the light higher, scanning the trees. For an instant, something dark splattered the snow, a glint of red beneath white. He took a cautious step forward. The beam caught it fully this time. Blood, vivid and wet, dripping from a branch onto the snow below. He whispered, "Dear God!" Rex growled again, deeper this time. Jack's finger slid toward the safety strap of the pistol at his belt. The forest ahead swallowed the light like a mouth. And then nothing. Just the wind and the slow, rhythmic fall of blood onto the snow. The storm had calmed, but the cold was sharper, slicing through the pines like glass. Snow drifted in fine silver veils as Jack Coleman pushed through the underbrush, his breath heavy in the frozen air. The light from his headlamp carved narrow tunnels through the darkness, catching flakes as they fell like ash. At his side moved Rex, the German shepherd, his gray and white coat dusted with frost, tail low, nostrils flaring as he followed a trail invisible to the human eye. Jack trusted that nose more than any compass. Jack had always been a man of control, a pilot, a soldier, a survivor. Yet the last few hours had shaken him in ways he hadn't felt since Afghanistan. The smell of blood on the snow, the scream swallowed by the forest. It had all awakened ghosts he had spent a decade trying to bury. He remembered the faces of those he couldn't save, the ones lost in fire or fog. Their eyes followed him even now, flickering in the corners of his vision whenever the wind moaned through the trees. Rex paused, ears twitching. The dog's breath came in short, white bursts. Ahead, half buried under the weight of snow, stood a makeshift wooden cabin, weathered and sunken like an open wound in the landscape. Jack approached cautiously, his boots crunching on ice. The door hung crooked, one hinge twisted, the other groaning as he pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Rust, mildew, and something else. Fear. Inside, the dim light from his flashlight revealed the chaos of a struggle. A tattered wool blanket, torn ropes, a plastic syringe half filled with frozen residue, and women's clothing scattered across the floor. He crouched, gloved fingers brushing the fabric. A red coat, small, with a torn sleeve and a patch that read St. Helena Youth Center. Whoever had worn it was young, maybe no more than 20. His chest tightened. On the far wall, something caught the beam of his flashlight. A wooden crate lid, crudely carved with a knife. The words, "Shipment Tuesday," dug into the grain like a threat. Jack's jaw clenched. He'd seen that kind of marking before. Military style, meant for tracking cargo. Only this wasn't cargo. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. The air felt heavier here, as if the walls themselves remembered. A small notebook lay on the table, its cover soaked and frozen stiff. Jack flipped it open, pages sticking together, half torn. The handwriting was jagged, trembling, and desperate. If anyone sees the message on the sand, know that we were taken. They'll return by dusk. A.R. The initials struck him like a hammer. A.R. He whispered them aloud, the sound echoing faintly. A woman's name, short and precise, haunted by discipline. Perhaps Anna Reeves, though the name didn't mean anything to him yet. But the words did. The hand that wrote them belonged to someone trained, someone calm enough to leave a trace instead of panic. Rex gave a sharp bark, breaking his thoughts. He turned. The dog had pushed his nose deep into the corner near the doorway, paws digging at the snowdrift that had blown inside. Jack crossed quickly, crouching beside him. Beneath the frost, a dark streak trailed outward, a drag mark, faint but deliberate. He brushed the snow away and found another print overlapping it, the deep tread of a man's boot, heavy, military style. The drag continued into the woods. Jack's pulse quickened. He could picture it now, a struggle, someone fighting, someone dragged. His throat tightened with the old helpless anger that had never really left him. The cold felt sharper against his face. He stepped outside, scanning the tree line. The world was silent again, save for the rhythmic crackle of snow beneath Rex's paws. He raised the radio strapped to his vest, thumbing the transmitter. Mayday, Mayday. This is Cessna 85 Kilo, position northeast of Moose Haven Island, possible human trafficking operation in progress. Request immediate response. Static answered. Just static. He switched frequencies, tried again, voice rougher now, more desperate. Bar Harbor Coast Guard, do you copy? Anyone? Nothing. Only the hollow hiss of dead air. Jack lowered the radio slowly. The granite cliffs that surrounded the island weren't just blocking the wind. They were blocking every signal. The realization settled like ice in his stomach. They were completely cut off. He looked down at Rex. The dog's amber eyes reflected the beam of his flashlight, unblinking, resolute. It's just us now, Jack murmured. His breath hung in the air like smoke. He could feel the weight of what he'd stepped into, a network of cruelty hidden behind the guise of an empty island. And somewhere out there, a woman named A.R. had left a message in the snow, still hoping someone might come. Jack holstered his pistol, his jaw set. All right, partner, he said softly, almost to himself. Let's find her before they come back. As they stepped deeper into the forest, the storm began to rise again. Wind screamed through the pines like voices trapped in ice. Behind them, the door of the abandoned cabin creaked open wider, then slammed shut on its own. The night fell heavy over the island, the kind that swallowed light whole. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the trees groaned under the weight of ice. Jack Coleman, tall and broad-shouldered, sat near a small campfire that spat weak orange sparks into the dark. His leather gloves were stiff with cold, his jawline shadowed by the beginnings of a beard, and his eyes, gray, steady, and exhausted, reflected the flickering light like gunmetal. He had built the fire against instinct, needing warmth more than concealment. Rex lay close, the 6-year-old German shepherd with a coat of iron gray and silver, his breath misting rhythmically. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes glowing faintly amber. Loyal, trained, and scarred, he was a mirror of his master, always ready, never at peace. Jack's mind circled the day's discoveries, the blood trail, the chained footprints, the journal signed AR. Each memory pressed like a weight behind his eyes. He had seen enough of human cruelty to know what kind of men carved messages like shipment, Tuesday. He thought of the nameless women whose belongings lay scattered in that abandoned cabin, their last hours spent in terror, waiting for a rescue that had never come. He hated that feeling, arriving too late. It was the same guilt that had driven him from the Navy years ago, after a failed rescue in Kandahar. 3 soldiers lost. His fault, or at least that's what his nightmares said. A low growl from Rex snapped him back. The dog's body went rigid, gaze fixed on the tree line. Jack stood, the motion slow, controlled. "Easy," he whispered. But Rex's growl deepened, his nose flaring. Then, from the shadows, came a shape, stumbling, human, half collapsing into the dim firelight. It was a man, maybe in his early 40s. He wore a torn green parka and soaked jeans, his face pale under the grime, his beard patchy and uneven. His right leg dragged behind him, dark with blood. "Help," the man rasped, voice cracking. "Please, I'm a fisherman. Got lost in the storm." His accent was local, but his tone was too careful, too rehearsed. Jack moved closer, eyes narrowing. The man's hair was dark, slicked with melted snow, and his skin carried that faint tan of someone who'd worked outdoors. But his hands, those were clean, with short, squared nails and faint marks along the thumb and forefinger where a trigger might rest. A contradiction that screamed wrong. "You alone out here?" Jack asked, crouching. The man nodded, eyes darting toward Rex, whose teeth were bared now, hackles raised like a living shadow. "I saw bodies," the man whispered, trembling. "Women. They're all dead. Killed by traffickers. Horrible, horrible men." He winced as if in pain, collapsing onto the snow. Jack's gut tightened. He'd seen liars before, men who could cry on command, bleed just enough to look believable. But the blood here looked too clean, too contained. He opened his pack and pulled out a small field kit. "Let me see that leg," he said. The man nodded, flinching. Jack peeled back the fabric. Beneath the soaked pant leg was a deep gash, nasty but neatly sutured with fishing line. "You did this yourself?" Jack asked. The man hesitated, then nodded. "Used my belt as a tourniquet. I thought I'd die out there." Jack leaned closer, catching the scent beneath the iron tang of blood. Antiseptic, the hospital kind. He looked at the wound again. Whoever stitched it had used steady, professional hands. Not a fisherman's, not a desperate man's. His gaze drifted higher and caught something else. The faint imprint of a holster strap pressed into the parka lining. A man's secret, half hidden, but not enough. "You were carrying," Jack murmured. The stranger blinked. "What?" Jack stood slowly, stepping back, and Rex growled louder now, low and steady, his body coiled. "You're not a fisherman," Jack said flatly. "So tell me, what are you?" The man's face twisted between fear and calculation. I told you the truth," he stammered. "They killed the others, the women. I barely escaped." Jack didn't answer. He moved to the fire, tossed in another piece of driftwood, the flames flaring up between them. He had no proof yet, only instinct. But in war, instinct had saved him more times than orders. He decided to wait. Let the night do its work. He tore a strip of gauze from his kit and rewrapped the wound with clean precision. "You can rest," he said curtly. "Don't move much or it'll open again." The man nodded gratefully, or pretended to. "Thank you. God bless you, mister." Jack didn't reply. He returned to his side of the fire, sitting with his back against a tree. The cold crept through his jacket, but the silence was colder still. He felt Rex shift beside him, eyes locked on the wounded stranger. The dog's body was tense, muscles trembling with restrained energy. Hours passed. The fire burned low, the world shrinking to a circle of dull orange light. Outside that circle, the island waited, silent, watching. The man lay still, breathing raggedly, eyes closed. Jack's lids grew heavy, his mind replaying old battles, half-lost faces in the snow. Then Rex moved. Barely. A subtle lowering of the head, ears forward. A sound like a growl caught in his throat. Jack opened his eyes. The man wasn't asleep. In the faint glow, his lids were half open, pupils gleaming. He was watching Rex. Not with fear, but calculation. Like a predator testing distance. Rex met his stare, unblinking. The dog's lips curled just enough to show white. The man froze, caught. Then, slowly, he let his eyelids fall shut again, feigning sleep. Jack said nothing. He didn't need to. The fire cracked, wind howled through the trees, and somewhere deep inside the forest, something metal struck stone, a faint echo, like chains shifting underground. Dawn broke weakly over Frosthaven Island, the pale sun barely cutting through the mist that hung like breath over the snow. The air smelled of salt and iron, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Jack Coleman, his stubble frosted white, moved with quiet determination through the thinning fog. His tall, broad frame blended into the grayness, a man built by discipline and regret. The cold didn't bother him anymore. It was familiar, almost welcome. It reminded him that he was still alive, still capable of doing something right, for once. He carried the memory of too many missions that had ended in silence. The face of the fake fisherman, Vincent, haunted him through the night. The man's eyes were too calculating, too clean for a castaway. Jack had seen that kind of calm before, in men who killed for profit. He'd told Vincent he was heading back to check the plane. In truth, he followed Rex, the 6-year-old German shepherd whose nose had caught something stronger than blood. The faint, oily scent of diesel fuel carried on the icy wind. Rex, with his gray and sable coat dusted with frost, moved with silent precision. The dog had been trained for tracking since birth, but what set him apart wasn't training. It was intuition. He could sense tension like a sixth sense, and he had been restless all night, ears flicking toward the northern cliffs. Jack trusted him implicitly. They trekked through the forest until the trees opened to a small northern cove. There, half buried in the ice, rested a fishing trawler. Its hull cracked, the paint peeled away in long strips, and smoke curling faintly from a chimney pipe. The name on the bow was faded, but Jack could make out fragments of letters. Sea Star. He crouched low, scanning the deck through binoculars. One figure, tall, stocky, wearing a dark coat, moved lazily across the deck, exhaling plumes of vapor. Guard duty. The rest of the boat was silent. Jack's instincts kicked in, sharp and cold as the air. He had infiltrated places like this before, in deserts, in jungles, but something about the stillness of the snow made this different. He felt every breath, every beat of his heart. Rex pressed close to his leg, waiting for the signal. Jack whispered, "Stay." Then he moved. Using the wreck's hull for cover, he crept to the ship's side and climbed the frozen ladder. His gloved hands gripped rust and ice, his boots silent on the metal. As he swung onto the deck, the guard turned, cigarette glowing red in the dim light. The man, Sawyer, a burly brute in his 30s, had a face that looked carved from stone, unshaven, scar running from his lip to his chin. He carried himself with lazy arrogance, the kind of man who had spent his life taking orders from worse men. He didn't even get a chance to speak. Jack lunged forward, grabbed his collar, and drove him into the railing. The blow was swift, practiced. Sawyer went limp before he hit the ground. Jack caught him, lowered him silently, and signaled for Rex. The dog bounded up the ramp, landing with the grace of a predator. Together, they slipped into the belly of the ship. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became. A blend of diesel, mold, and something more human. Sweat, fear, and blood. Jack turned his flashlight on low, sweeping across the narrow corridor lined with crates. Some were marked with serial codes and strange Cyrillic letters. Weapons, he realized. The trafficking wasn't just people. It was arms. At the end of the hall stood a heavy door, its hinges crusted with frost. Rex pressed his nose against the crack, then looked up, ears forward. Jack exhaled once, braced himself, and yanked the latch open. The light fell into a small, cramped room and froze him where he stood. 4 women sat bound against the wall, hands tied, faces pale beneath the grime. 3 of them barely stirred, their eyes hollow, their breath shallow. But one lifted her head. Her eyes were sharp, alert, the eyes of someone who hadn't given up. She was in her mid-30s, with shoulder-length dark hair matted by days of captivity, and a small cut on her cheek that had already started to heal. Her face was angular, intelligent, the kind that once smiled often, but hadn't in a long time. Despite the bruises, she held herself upright, her back straight even in defeat. Jack felt the air shift. She wasn't like the others. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, voice low but steady. "My name is Anna Reeves, detective, Human Trafficking Task Force. They think I'm dead." Jack blinked, taken aback. "You're the one who left the SOS," he said quietly. She nodded, eyes flicking to Rex, then back to him. "Emil. I had to. Vincent saw my badge before the storm hit. He killed the captain and took control. They've been using this ship to smuggle weapons under the guise of rescue missions. The women," her voice broke for the first time, barely. "They were supposed to disappear." Jack's hands clenched at his sides. Everything clicked. The fake fisherman, the organized operation, the strange calmness of the man by the fire. Vincent wasn't a victim. He was the architect. Anna's gaze hardened again. "He'll come back soon," she said. "He always checks before dawn." Jack nodded once, the decision already made in his mind. "Then we won't be here when he does." He reached into his pack and began cutting the women free. Rex stood guard, his head snapping at every sound from above deck. One of the rescued women, young and trembling, whispered, "Who are you?" Jack didn't look up. "Just someone who was flying by," he said, his voice low and flat. and saw a message that shouldn't have been ignored. As they prepared to leave, a faint thud echoed above, a door creaking open. Anna froze, her eyes narrowing. Jack met her gaze, already drawing his pistol. The wind outside howled through the broken hull, carrying with it the promise of another confrontation. Snow slashed sideways across the frozen forest, each gust a scream tearing through the silence of Frost Haven Island. The trees bent like wounded soldiers under the weight of ice. Jack Coleman, his breath a white mist, pushed forward through knee-deep snow, his shoulders hunched under the burden of both exhaustion and purpose. His rugged face was drawn tight with resolve, the coarse stubble around his jaw silvered by frost. Once a Navy pilot, now a man who lived between guilt and redemption, he had seen storms like this before, on battlefields, in deserts, in his mind, but none felt as personal as tonight's. Beside him, Anna Reeves, still in the torn uniform of her undercover assignment, stumbled but refused to fall. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, her lips pale and cracked. She was strong, too strong for someone who had survived captivity, but her strength came from something buried deeper than training. She had promised herself she wouldn't die on this island, not before seeing the women safe. Her hazel eyes, once calm and analytical, now burned with fury and disbelief that the world could still harbor monsters like Vincent. Behind them, Rex, the German shepherd with a sable coat streaked with snow, carried himself like a soldier. His breath came in short bursts, his paws leaving perfect prints in the white. 6 years old, trained for search and rescue, he had the body of a wolf and the soul of a guardian. Every few steps, he turned his head, scanning the shadows, ears twitching at the faintest sound. He wasn't just following Jack, he was protecting him. They moved through the skeletal forest, guiding 3 half-conscious women wrapped in blankets stripped from the ship's bunks. The women, silent, trembling, were ghosts of what they had endured. Jack and Anna supported them through the snow, their boots sinking deep. Jack could feel his fingers going numb, but he didn't care. Every mile mattered. Every breath was a defiance against the darkness they'd walked out of. Through the howling wind, a shape emerged. The faint silhouette of Jack's Cessna 185, half buried in frost at the edge of the cove. Its red and white body looked fragile against the elements, but to him it was salvation. He motioned for Anna to keep moving. "Almost there," he said, his voice hoarse, the words nearly stolen by the wind. Anna nodded, tightening her grip on one of the women. They reached the plane as the storm grew louder, snow swirling like ash in a graveyard. Jack pulled the cabin door open and guided the survivors inside. He moved with instinct. Fuel check, ignition prep, every motion precise even under pressure. He had done this his entire life, flying into chaos and hoping to come out whole. Then Rex froze. His hackles rose. His lips curled in a low growl that vibrated through the air like a warning bell. Anna turned, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" she whispered. Jack looked past the plane's tail into the storm. A figure emerged. Vincent, staggering through the snow, his parka soaked with blood, his face twisted by rage. His once calm mask was gone, replaced by something feral. His blonde hair, matted and wild, stuck to his forehead. One hand gripped a pistol, the other hung limp at his side. His voice cut through the wind like broken glass. "I gave her a chance to live," he snarled, eyes locking on Anna. "But cops like you only deserve to be buried under ice." Anna's breath caught. Her hand moved for her holster, but it was empty, lost in the chaos aboard the ship. Jack stood half-turned, trapped between instinct and timing. His gun was holstered, but his voice was steady, cold, and commanding. "Rex, take him." The words were a spark in the storm. Rex exploded forward, a blur of muscle and snow, launching off the icy ground with terrifying precision. Vincent raised his pistol, but too late. The dog hit him like a freight train, jaws locking around his arm. The gun went off, the bullet shattering harmlessly into the ice. Vincent screamed, twisting, but Rex didn't let go. The sound was primal, a roar of nature reclaiming justice. Jack sprinted forward, wrenching the gun away and kicking it deep into the slush. Vincent fell to his knees, bleeding and broken, his fury collapsing into pain and fear. The snow around them turned crimson. Anna stood frozen for a heartbeat, watching the man who had orchestrated so much suffering reduced to nothing but trembling flesh in the cold. Then, over the wind, came a new sound, the deep, rhythmic thud of helicopter blades cutting through the blizzard. A spotlight sliced the storm apart, sweeping across the beach. "Coast Guard!" Jack shouted, waving his arm. The helicopter descended, its rotors sending snow in violent spirals. Rescue medics in orange suits jumped down, their movements swift and sure. They lifted the survivors one by one, wrapping them in thermal blankets and guiding them aboard. Anna followed, her face streaked with tears she didn't bother to hide. When the last woman was secured, she turned to Jack. "You coming?" she yelled over the roar. Jack shook his head. "I'll follow in the plane. Go." His voice cracked slightly, but his eyes were firm. She nodded once, understanding more than words could say. When the helicopter lifted off, the downdraft sent snow flying like silver shards. Jack turned back to Rex, who stood trembling from exhaustion, his fur stiff with ice but his eyes still sharp, still watching Vincent's motionless body. Jack knelt, pressing his forehead gently to the dog's. "Good work, partner," he murmured, his voice raw with gratitude. "We heard the call, even through the storm." Moments later, the Cessna roared to life. Jack guided it over the white expanse as the first weak light of dawn crept over the horizon. In the cabin, Rex rested his head on Jack's leg, eyes fixed on the window where the snow drifted by like ghosts finally set free. The sky ahead glowed with the pale gold of survival. When the last echo of the storm faded and the first light of dawn broke across the frozen horizon, Jack looked out through the cockpit window, toward a sky washed clean by snow, toward a silence that finally felt like peace. Beside him, Rex rested his head on his lap, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. They had seen cruelty and coldness beyond words, yet somehow grace had found them in that place, not through thunder, not through fire, but through loyalty, courage, and faith. Some people say miracles are rare, but maybe they're just quiet, hidden in the way a stranger chooses compassion over fear, or in the eyes of a faithful dog who refuses to give up. That's how God works, not always in grand gestures, but in the steady hearts that keep believing when everything else is frozen. So tonight, as you close this story, take a moment to think about your own storms, the ones only you can hear. Remember that even in the darkest nights, there's always a whisper of light waiting for you to look up. Because sometimes, God's miracles don't come with wings, they come on four paws, or in a human heart that refuses to turn away. If this story touches your heart, share it, so someone out there who's lost might find their own light again. Tell us where you're watching from and what miracle you're still waiting for. And if you believe that faith, love, and courage can still change the world, subscribe and walk this path with us. May God bless you, your loved ones, and every quiet act of kindness you choose to do.